Okay, should you be able to sue someone who calls you a racist or even transphobic or one of those phobias that the left likes to throw out? Well, in Florida, the state legislature is coming together and saying, yeah, we want people to be able to sue for defamation if they're called racist and it happens to be a lie. Let's talk about it. Okay, Florida bill would make it defamation to accuse someone of racism, sexism, homophobia, and transphobia. Now, I gotta give you just a little background. See, the way the law is when it comes to defamation is that you can only sue someone for statements that you can prove that are objectively true or false. As an example, if I say that this person who's on the screen is a criminal or is a convicted fraudster or something like that, the court would say, well, can that statement be proven objectively true or false? You can, right? You can say, well, have they ever been convicted in a court of law? You know, that type of thing. And if the person can show that, hey, I've never been convicted of anything, I'm not a criminal, then that is defamation. I've defamed that person. There's a little bit more that goes into it, but that's essentially what you're saying. Can this statement be proven true or false? Now, the problem with racism, for instance, it's so subjective. You can't really objectively prove that it's true someone's racist or it's false that someone's racist. There's shades of gray, right? Just because I don't want to hang out with black people doesn't mean I'm racist, or because I only want to hang out with black people, does that mean I'm racist? It's like there's so many different points of view. And we know how sometimes people just say people are racist just to say it, since it's so subjective. Courts usually say calling someone racist isn't defamatory. Same thing with sexism and homophobia. But in Florida, they're saying, well, hey, calling someone racist could be defamatory because they could lose their job. There's real social consequences to being labeled as a racist. And if those claims of racism are false, then you should be able to recover. But that's, I think, the key issue. How do you prove that someone's not racist? Because it's just like proving how someone is racist. It's so subjective. So let's see how Florida tries to reconcile this. Miami, a bill introduced in the Florida Senate would make it defamation to accuse someone of racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, which could total the freedom of speech in the Sunshine State, which could total. I'm not sure. That's a weird wording of it, right? Which could total. I was like, yeah. SB 1780, defamation, false light, unauthorized publication of name and likeness, which was introduced on Friday, would make it easier for an individual to sue another person for defamation. So essentially, all those liberals out there who love to say people are racist, this bill makes it very easy for them to be sued for false claims of racism. According to the measure, an allegation that the plaintiff has discriminated against another person or group because of race, sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity constitutes defamation per se. Okay, so they even moved the defamation per se. So even when the allegations are false, they are automatically defamatory. Now, you know what? To me, that makes some sense. So let's say, for instance, I'm working a job at like a bakery, and the baker says, hey, Nate, you know what? You've just been messing up. There's been so many things you've done wrong. We're going to let you go. Right? And then I get fired. Then I go and say, they fired me because they're racist. And that bakery can show, like, no, here is his performance evaluations. Here is the times that he's messed up. We let him go because he was a bad employee. And they can prove that objectively, that I wasn't fired because I was black. I was fired because I was a bad employee. Then that person should be able to recover, right? You've harmed my reputation by telling this lie. But I can see in that narrow sense, calling someone racist could lead to a defamation claim. Under SB 1780, anyone in these circumstances wouldn't have to prove actual malice, which was the standard set for defamation suits following the decision in the 1964 U.S. Supreme Court case, New York Times v. Sullivan. That's tough because if you're a public figure, you have to show actual malice. So if you're not a public figure, it would just be negligence, which is an extremely low standard. So now you're rubbing up against the Constitution because you can't pass a state law that just says, we don't have to follow the Supreme Court's constitutional dictate. So if they're saying you don't have to prove actual malice even if you're a public figure, that's unconstitutional, and this law is not going to stand. Additionally, the bill would make it easier to set up the conditions for a fact finder to automatically infer that actual malice took place after an accusation of discrimination is made. In cases regarding accusations of homophobia and transphobia, defendants charged with defamation are not allowed to use the plaintiff's religious or scientific beliefs as their defense. So if I'm the plaintiff and I say, you said that I'm homophobic, and the defendant says, well, you're a Christian and all Christians are homophobic, they say you can't use that, which makes sense, right? Or if I say, well, scientifically, men are XY and women are XX, you can't use that against me. And if they're found liable for defamation, defamation could be fined at least $35,000. Woof. Woof. Like its Florida counterpart, HB 757, a bill that would significantly narrow the definition of public figure and defamation suits by excluding non-elected and appointed public employees and individuals who gained notoriety by publicly defending themselves against accusations, giving interviews, or being the subject of viral video, images, statements uploaded to the internet. All right, so there's a concept of the limited public figure that I think they're trying to work around. So if you're a public figure, you have to prove actual malice. So what is actual malice? Actual malice is essentially the plaintiff has to prove the defendant knew the information and said it anyway. Now, there's a catch-22 to what's known as the limited public figure, because the limited public figure, they wouldn't be a public figure but for the defamation. So for instance, Nicholas Salmon is a perfect example. He was some kid, the news media said he was a racist, and then he goes to court and says, they defamed me. They said I was a racist, they said all these negative things about me. And the court said, well, Nicholas Sandman, you have to prove they said it with actual malice, because in this limited sense, you are a public figure. You're a public figure because of this event. But that's the rub. It's like, well, they defamed me and made me a public figure. Now they get the benefit off their defamation by forcing me to prove that they already knew the information versus the negligence standard. So Florida's trying to fix that and say, no. We're not going to do that. You have to prove it by negligence, because just because you defamed him and made him famous doesn't now make him a public figure, which I think is a nice little touch. Lastly, the bill removes certain privileges provided to journalists and media entities, specifically the right to keep sources anonymous. According to the bill, statements made by anonymous sources would be considered presumptively false and make journalists vulnerable to these suits. So in other words, if you have an anonymous source telling you something, you can't just go out and scream it to the high heavens and then hide behind the fact that you had some type of source, because you could say, well, I didn't know it was false because this person said it. They said, no, you have to assume that if the person is anonymous, it's presumptively false. And if you go with it, then you are liable for defamation if that information turns out to actually be false. And that makes sense. I think that makes sense, because, the anonymous source shouldn't protect you from defamation. Now, I think this bill is not long for this world if it does get passed. And the reason why is because of the Constitution. Terms like racism, sexism, and homophobia have traditionally, nationwide, have always been subjective terms. And when you call someone a racist, it's an opinion. And they're not able to be proven to be true or false. It's just how someone feels. And the Constitution 100% protects opinions. So if my opinion is that someone's racist, and the Constitution says I can say that and be fully protected. So, I think Florida's trying to find a way to stop that protection in terms of saying, okay, well, if we can prove that when you call this person racist, that is false, then you can recover it. And I do think that sometimes racism, or calling someone a racist, could be defamatory, because just like, the example I gave earlier, if you can prove that someone was fired for some other reason other than racism, if someone says you fired me because I'm racist, and I can prove definitively and objectively that's not the case, then if I'm harmed from that particular speech, then I should be able to recover, because you've just defamed me. You've hurt my reputation by calling me racist. And we know nowadays being called racist, sexist, and homophobia can destroy your business, could really hurt your reputation. So we'll see. But I think it's going to have a tough time in the federal courts, because I think if it goes up to the Supreme Court, they're going to say, well, no matter how horrible their opinion is, if it's an opinion, it's protected. But let me know how you feel in the comment section. Like, share, subscribe, do your great YouTube stuff. Are you in support of what Florida's doing? Because don't forget, by doing this, they're also narrowing free speech. So I know I had a lot of free speech absolutes in there who believe we should have more free speech, but this technically is going to limit free speech even more. So let me know how you feel in the comment section. My name is Nathan Lawyer, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.